I promise I'll pay you back one day." That's what the little girl said to me while standing on the sidewalk in a pair of broken school shoes with her tiny toes sticking out through the front. And I swear, something about that sentence hit me harder than it should have. Maybe because nobody had spoken to me that honestly in years. Maybe because she looked embarrassed, asking for help instead of expecting it. Or maybe because deep down, I could already tell this wasn't really about shoes. It was about two lonely people running into each other at exactly the moment they both needed it most. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and from the outside, my life looked perfect. I owned a successful company, lived in a luxury apartment downtown, drove expensive cars, wore expensive watches, and spent most of my days sitting in meetings where people acted like money was the only thing in the world that mattered. But the truth is, I was exhausted all the time. Not physically, emotionally. I had gotten so used to eating dinner alone and waking up alone that eventually it stopped feeling sad and just started feeling normal. That afternoon, I had just walked out of another pointless meeting with a headache and a tight tie around my neck, thinking about absolutely nothing except getting home and shutting the world out for the night. Then I heard a tiny voice behind me say, "Sir?" I almost kept walking. I hate admitting that now, but after years of people coming to me for money, favors, or business opportunities, I stopped believing strangers ever wanted anything genuine from me. But when I turned around and saw that little blonde girl standing there trying not to cry while her shoes were literally falling apart beneath her feet, something inside me cracked before she even said another word. She looked maybe 5 or 6 years old, and what hurt the most was how hard she was trying to stay brave. Kids that age are supposed to cry, complain, hold on to their parents. But this little girl just stood there quietly trying to hold herself together while admitting that the kids at school laughed at her because her shoes were torn apart. Then she looked up at me with those huge blue eyes and softly said, "If you help me now, I promise I'll pay you back when I grow up." And I could tell she meant every single word. She wasn't trying to manipulate me. She wasn't acting cute to get sympathy. She was trying her best to hold on to her dignity while asking a complete stranger for help. And honestly, that's the moment my heart broke for her. The strangest part was that after buying Lily those shoes, I didn't feel proud. I felt awake. That night, my apartment was still quiet, the television still played in the background, and the same city lights blinked outside my window, but something inside me had shifted. I kept seeing her face when she said the shoes didn't hurt anymore, and I kept hearing that little promise in her voice, "I'll pay you back one day." $45 had meant almost nothing to me, but to her, it had given back a piece of childhood she had been trying to hide under broken sneakers. For the first time in years, I slept without thinking about contracts, numbers, or meetings. I slept thinking about a little girl smiling at her own feet like the world had finally been kind to her. A week passed, and I still couldn't get Lily out of my head. I even went back to that same street twice, pretending I had business nearby, though the truth was much simpler and a little embarrassing. I wanted to see if she was okay. I was a 42-year-old man running a company, and there I was walking the same sidewalk, looking for a child I had met for less than an hour. But something about her had reached a part of me I thought had gone quiet for good. By Monday afternoon, I couldn't sit through another meeting. The reports felt pointless, the conversations felt empty, and the walls of my office felt tighter than my tie. I told my assistant I had an appointment, then walked out before anyone could ask questions. I found myself on the same block where I had first met her. The air was cooler that day, the trees had started turning gold, and for the first time in a long time, I actually noticed the city around me. Then I heard a small voice behind me shout, "Shoe man!" I turned so fast I nearly lost my balance. And there she was. Lily. Her blonde pigtails were neater than before, her jacket was too thin for the weather, but those white sneakers with pink stripes were shining on her feet like she had polished them with all the care in the world. I couldn't help smiling. "Lily," I said, and she looked at me like I had just done something amazing. "You remembered my name," she said. "Of course I did," I told her. "How could I forget?" She looked down at her shoes, then lifted one foot proudly. "They still look new. I clean them every day after school." I told her they looked great, and she smiled in that careful way children smile when they're not used to good things lasting. Then she said, very seriously, "Nobody laughs at me now. Tyler Brooks used to point at my old shoes and say I was poor. Now he doesn't say anything. I felt my chest tighten. I had dealt with cold businessmen, dishonest partners, and people who smiled while trying to take advantage of me. But somehow, the thought of a little boy humiliating Lily over worn-out shoes bothered me more than all of them. I said Tyler didn't sound like a very nice kid. Lily wrinkled her nose and said, "He's not, but it's okay now." Then she spun once on the sidewalk, just to show me the shoes again. She thanked me again, and I realized she still didn't really know who I was. "My name is Ethan," I said. "Ethan Caldwell." She repeated it slowly, like she was testing whether it sounded important. Then she nodded and said, "That sounds like a rich person's name." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do. "I don't know about that." She tilted her head. "Do you have a car?" I said yes. "Then you're rich?" There was no judgment in her voice, just the clean, simple logic of a child. I almost tried to explain that money and importance were not the same thing, but the way she looked at me stopped me. She wasn't impressed by the money. She was impressed because, in her mind, I had been kind. I asked what she was doing there by herself. Lily pointed across the street to a laundromat. "My mom works there after school. I wait until she's done." I looked at my watch. It was almost 5. "You wait out here every day?" She shrugged like it was no big deal. "Only when Mrs. Harper can't watch me. She's sick today." The way she said it made my stomach sink. Not because she was complaining, because she wasn't. That was the painful part. She talked about waiting alone on a sidewalk for hours, the way another child might talk about waiting for cartoons to start. Her backpack sat crooked on her shoulders, the zipper broken, the straps patched in 2 places. I asked what time her mother got off work. 6, she said, already sitting down on the bench outside the laundromat and pulling a worn little book from her bag. I read while I wait. I stood there for a moment, not sure what I was supposed to do. The old version of me would have nodded, said something polite, and walked away. But I couldn't do that anymore. Not after seeing her shoes. Not after hearing her talk like being left alone on a city sidewalk was just part of growing up. I had no dinner plans, no family waiting, no real reason to go home. So before I could talk myself out of it, I asked, "Would you like to go somewhere while you wait? Maybe get a snack?" Lily's eyes widened, not with greed, but with the kind of surprise that makes you realize a child has learned not to ask for much. "Can we go to the backpack store?" she asked. "I look in the window all the time, but I've never been inside." I smiled and said we could, but first we should let her mom know. We crossed the street into the laundromat together. The place smelled like warm soap, steam, and tired people trying to get through the day. Behind the counter, a woman in her 30s was folding sheets quickly, like she had done the same movement 1,000 times and didn't have the energy to slow down. Her blonde hair was tied back tight, and there were dark circles under her eyes. But when Lily called "Mom," the woman looked up, and her whole face changed. The tiredness didn't disappear, but love came through it so clearly that I felt almost uncomfortable watching it. "Hey baby," she said, "did you finish your homework?" Lily nodded, then turned and pointed at me. "Mom, this is the man who bought my shoes." The woman's smile vanished almost instantly. She looked at me, then back at Lily, and I saw fear move across her face before she tried to hide it. She came around the counter quickly, lowered her voice, and said, "Lily, what have I told you about talking to strangers?" Lily frowned and said, "But he's not a stranger. He's Ethan." And the way her mother looked at me after that told me this moment was about to become much more complicated than a pair of shoes. Rachel looked at me like she wanted to thank me and protect her daughter from me at the same time, and honestly, I couldn't blame her. A single mother working long hours in a laundromat didn't have the luxury of trusting every man who smiled kindly at her child. She took a breath, kept her voice calm, and said, "Thank you for the shoes. Lily hasn't stopped talking about them. That was very kind of you." I suddenly felt awkward under her eyes, the kind of awkward I never felt in boardrooms. "It really wasn't much," I said. "She's a wonderful kid." For just a second, Rachel's face softened. "She is," she said, and then she offered her hand. "Rachel Walker, Lily's mom." I shook her hand and noticed right away how rough her palm was, how short her nails were, how tired her fingers looked from work. It told me more about her life than any introduction could. "Ethan Caldwell," I said. Before Rachel could say anything else, Lily bounced beside us and said, "Mom, Ethan said he could take me to look at backpacks. Can I go, please?" Rachel's smile faded again, not because she wanted to disappoint Lily, but because every tired parent knows that one wrong yes can cost more than a child understands. She looked from me to her daughter and said, "I don't know, honey, Mr. Caldwell probably has things to do, and I'll be finished in about an hour." I stepped in quickly, maybe too quickly. "I don't have any plans. I'd be happy to take her. We'll stay close, and I'll bring her back before 6. Rachel bit her lip. I could see the whole fight happening inside her. Say no and break Lily's heart, or say yes and trust a man she had only just met. I stood there trying to look harmless, which felt strange for a man who had spent most of his life making people nervous across negotiation tables. Lily clasped her hands together and whispered, "Please, Mom." After a long second, Rachel nodded. "Okay, but you're back here at 6 sharp." "I promise," I said, and I meant it more seriously than I expected. Rachel knelt in front of Lily and fixed the collar of her thin jacket. "You listen, okay? You stay with Mr. Caldwell, and you don't ask for anything." Lily nodded like she had just been given a mission. "Okay, Mom." As we walked out, I caught Rachel watching us through the glass. That look stayed with me. She wasn't just letting her daughter go look at backpacks. She was placing the only good thing in her life in my hands for 1 hour, and I felt the weight of that more than any business deal I had ever signed. The backpack store was only a couple of blocks away, but Lily filled every step with stories. She told me about school, about her friends, about Miss Parker, her teacher with red hair and funny glasses, and about how her new shoes had changed everything. "Even Miss Parker noticed," Lily said proudly. "She asked where I got them, and I told her an angel bought them for me." I laughed before I could stop myself. "An angel?" Lily looked at me like that should have been obvious. "Angels help people. You helped me." There was no drama in the way she said it, no big speech, just a child making sense of the world with the pieces she had. And somehow that made it harder to answer. When we stepped into the backpack store, Lily stopped right inside the door like she had walked into a place she had only dreamed about. The walls were covered with backpacks in every color, some with stars, some with animals, some bright enough to make the whole store feel like a birthday party. Her eyes moved from shelf to shelf, and she whispered, "There are so many." A young employee came over and asked if we needed help. I told him we were looking for a backpack for her, and he pointed us to the children's section. Lily walked slowly between the rows, touching each bag with the tips of her fingers like she was afraid someone might tell her she wasn't allowed. Then she stopped in front of a light blue backpack with tiny silver stars across the front. Her voice got so small I almost missed it. "This one is really pretty." I picked it up and checked the straps, the zipper, the stitching. It was sturdy, the kind of backpack that could survive school, sidewalks, and a little girl who had learned to take care of the few things that were hers. "Want to try it on?" I asked. Lily nodded, eyes wide. I helped her slide her arms through the straps and adjusted them so the bag sat right on her shoulders. She took 2 careful steps, then turned toward the mirror on the wall. For a moment, she just stared at herself. Not posing, not showing off, just looking, as if she was trying to recognize the girl in front of her. Then a slow smile spread across her face. "It's perfect," she said, barely above a whisper. I didn't even look at the price. "We'll take it." While the employee rang it up, Lily stood beside me quietly, holding the backpack straps with both hands. Then she looked up and asked the kind of question only a child has the courage to ask. "Why are you doing all this?" I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Because, honestly, I didn't know how to explain it in a clean way. I wasn't a man known for walking into stores and buying things for children I barely knew. I wasn't even sure I had noticed people like Lily before that week, and that thought made me ashamed. So I told her the simplest truth I had. "Because you deserve good things," I said. "And because helping you makes me happy." Lily seemed to accept that. Then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, she slipped her small hand into mine. "Thanks, Ethan." I looked down at her hand in mine and felt something quiet settle in my chest. Not excitement, not pity. Something warmer than both. On the way back to the laundromat, Lily was quieter. She kept adjusting the new backpack on her shoulders, still smiling to herself every few steps. Then she said, "When I grow up, I want to be a doctor." "A doctor?" I asked. "That's a big dream. Why?" Her face changed. The smile didn't disappear completely, but it became smaller, more serious. She looked down at the sidewalk and said, "My mom has this cough that doesn't go away. She says she's just tired, but I know it's not just that. I want to help her, and I want to help people who can't pay for expensive doctors." I felt the words land hard. Some adults I knew had spent their whole lives chasing bigger houses and bigger titles, and here was this little girl dreaming of becoming a doctor because her mother coughed too much and money always seemed to stand between people and help. I told her she would be an amazing doctor, and the surprising part was, I truly believed it. We got back to the laundromat 10 minutes before 6. Rachel was already at the door, checking the time, trying to look calm and failing. The relief on her face when she saw Lily was impossible to miss. "Mom, look." Lily ran to her and turned around so Rachel could see the backpack. Rachel touched the blue fabric, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't read right away. Gratitude was there, but so was worry, and maybe a little guilt too. "It's beautiful, baby," she said, brushing Lily's hair back from her face. Then she looked at me and lowered her voice. "You really didn't have to do that." I almost said it was nothing, because that was the easy answer people like me always gave. But standing there in that laundromat, watching Rachel try to smile while carrying more weight than she should have had to carry alone, I knew it wasn't nothing. Not to Lily, not to Rachel, and maybe not even to me anymore. I wanted to, I told Rachel, because that was the only honest answer I had. She looked like she wanted to argue, maybe remind me that kindness from strangers usually comes with a price. But Lily was already hugging my leg again, the same tight little hug she had given me the day I bought her shoes. And for some reason, that small weight against me felt more real than anything I had touched in years. Rachel told Lily to thank me, and Lily looked up with that bright face and said, "Thank you, Ethan." I told her she was welcome, but as I watched mother and daughter walk away hand in hand, I felt something close around my chest. I didn't want this to be the last time I saw them. I didn't want to go back to being a man who came home to a quiet apartment and pretended peace was the same as happiness. So before I could talk myself out of it, I called Rachel's name. She stopped and turned around, cautious as always. I said Lily might need a new school uniform soon, and Rachel's face tightened right away. "She told you that?" she asked. "Not exactly," I said. "I noticed her coat is getting small, and I thought maybe." Rachel cut me off gently, not rude, just tired. "Mr. Caldwell, I really appreciate everything you've done, but I can't keep accepting gifts." I understood her pride. I respected it. So I said, "Then don't call it a gift, call it a loan. Lily already promised she'd pay me back when she grows up." For the first time, Rachel almost laughed. "She said that?" "Word for word," I told her. She shook her head, but the corner of her mouth softened. "You're an interesting man, Ethan Caldwell." I asked if that was good or bad, and she said, "I haven't decided yet." Then she adjusted her purse and said, "We'll be at the uniform store Saturday morning at 1027 Maple Street, if you want to come." I don't remember the last time one sentence made me feel that nervous and hopeful at the same time. I just nodded and said, "I'll be there." Rachel smiled then, really smiled, and I saw Lily in her face so clearly it almost caught me off guard. Same warmth, same blue eyes, same little spark that made the world feel less cold. "See you Saturday," she said. I stood there on the sidewalk watching them leave, Lily with her starry backpack bouncing against her shoulders, and Rachel walking beside her like a woman who had learned to be strong because nobody had given her another choice. That night, I didn't turn on the television. I sat on my balcony looking over the city, and for the first time in years, I wasn't just passing time, I was waiting for something. By spring, I barely recognized my own life. It had been almost 3 months since the day Lily stopped me outside my office with those broken shoes, and somehow that one afternoon had changed the rhythm of everything. Mondays and Thursdays, I picked Lily up from school and took her for a snack before Rachel finished her shift at the laundromat. Saturdays were for grocery runs, walks in the park, sometimes just sitting together while Lily talked about everything that entered her head. My apartment changed too. It used to look like a place no one lived in for very long, clean, expensive, and cold. Now there were fresh flowers on the table because Rachel once said the room needed color, and there was a drawing on my fridge that Lily had made at school. It showed a yellow house, a bright sun, and 3 people standing in front of it, all smiling. She never explained who the 3 people were. She didn't have to. One afternoon, I was sitting in my office, pretending to read a financial report when the clock hit 4, and all I could think about was seeing Lily run out of the school gate with that blue backpack bouncing behind her. Then my phone rang. Nora, my secretary, came on the line and said, "Mr. Caldwell, Miss Parker from Maple Grove Elementary is calling. She says it's important." My hand tightened around the phone before I even answered. Miss Parker was Lily's teacher. Put her through. A second later, her voice came on, careful and worried. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm sorry to call you at work. Rachel gave me your number for emergencies." My stomach dropped. "Is Lily okay?" "She's okay physically," Miss Parker said quickly, "but she's very upset. There was an incident in class today." I stood up without even realizing it. "What kind of incident?" Miss Parker paused, and that pause told me enough to make my chest go tight. The children were talking about their parents' jobs. When it was Lily's turn, Tyler Brooks interrupted her and said some cruel things. About her not having a father. About her mother working at the laundromat. About money. I closed my eyes for a second. Tyler Brooks again. "What happened after that?" I asked. Miss Parker lowered her voice. Lily stayed quiet for a while. Then, at recess, she hit Tyler. I should not have felt proud. I knew that. She was a child, and hitting another child wasn't okay. But for 1 second, all I could picture was Lily standing there swallowing pain. She was too young to carry, and I had to force myself not to smile. "Is she in serious trouble?" "She has detention, Miss Parker said. "We called Rachel, but she's in the middle of a shift she can't leave. That's why I called you." I was already reaching for my coat. "I'm on my way." The drive to Maple Grove felt longer than it was. I kept thinking about Lily's face, the way she tried to act brave whenever something hurt her. She had done it with the shoes, with the old backpack, with her mother's cough, and now she was probably doing it again in some school office, pretending she was fine because that was what kids like Lily learned too early. Maple Grove Elementary was a red brick building with a wide playground and small jackets hanging in the classroom windows. I parked fast and walked straight into the main office. "I'm Ethan Caldwell," I told the secretary. "I'm here for Lily Walker." Miss Parker called me. The woman looked up from her desk, polite but careful. "Are you family?" For a moment, I didn't know how to answer. 3 months ago, I was a stranger who bought a pair of shoes. Now Lily's teacher had called me because Rachel couldn't leave work. I swallowed and said, "I'm a close family friend." The secretary checked the list, then nodded toward the hallway. And as I stood there waiting for someone to bring Lily out, I realized how badly I wanted that answer to be true. When I walked into room 104 and saw Lily sitting in that little chair with her head down and her feet not even touching the floor, I understood right away this was not just about a school fight. This was about a little girl who had been holding too much in for too long, and today somebody had finally pushed on the one place that still hurt. Miss Parker stood near her desk, red hair pulled back, round glasses resting low on her nose, and the moment she saw me, relief crossed her face. "Mr. Caldwell, thank you for coming," she said. Lily looked up when she heard my name. For half a second, her face brightened, like she had been waiting for someone safe to walk through that door, but then she dropped her eyes again and tried to look serious. I knelt in front of her and said, "Hey, kiddo. Sounds like you had a rough day." She gave a small shrug and said nothing. Miss Parker quietly excused herself, saying she would give us a minute, and when the door closed behind her, I pulled over a chair that was far too small for me and sat beside Lily with my knees almost touching my chest. I looked at her for a moment, then said gently, "So, I heard you swung at Tyler Brooks." Lily stayed quiet, then muttered, "He deserved it." I should have corrected her right away, but the truth was, a part of me understood. "Maybe he did," I said. "But tell me what happened." She pressed her lips together, staring at the floor like the answer was written somewhere between her shoes. Then her voice came out so small I almost didn't hear it. "He said my mom was..." She stopped, unable to repeat the word, and my stomach tightened. Then she forced out the rest. And he said, "You only spend time with us because you feel sorry for us." I felt anger rise in me, but I kept my voice low because she didn't need my anger. She needed somewhere safe to put hers. "Did you believe him?" I asked. Lily looked at me then, her blue eyes wet but stubborn. "No," she said, "but I got mad." I nodded and took her small hand. I would have been mad too. Her fingers curled around mine, and for a few seconds neither of us spoke. Then I said, "Listen to me, Lily. I don't spend time with you and your mom because I feel sorry for you. I spend time with you because you two are some of the best people I've ever known." Her chin trembled a little. "Really? Really?" I said. "Promise." She stared at me like she needed to hear it twice before she could let herself believe it. Then her face softened, but only for a moment before worry came back. "Mom's going to be mad." "Probably a little," I said honestly. "But she'll understand why you were hurt. We just have to find a better way next time." Lily looked away and mumbled, "It worked on Tyler," he cried. I tried very hard not to laugh, and failed just enough for her to notice. "Okay," I said, clearing my throat. "Still, next time you tell a teacher." She nodded, not fully convinced, but willing to give me that much. Then suddenly she reached for her backpack. "I made something for you." "For me?" She pulled out a folded piece of paper and handed it over with both hands, like it was something important. "I can't pay you back for the shoes yet," she said, "so I made you this." I unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing in colored pencil. One tall stick figure in a suit, one small stick figure with pigtails, and the two of them holding hands under a big red heart. Across the top, in crooked bright letters, it said, "Ethan and Lily, best friends." I stared at that paper longer than I expected. I had been given expensive watches, rare wine, custom suits, gifts from people trying to impress me, but none of them had ever made it hard for me to speak. This did. "Lily," I said quietly, "this is beautiful." She looked proud, but also very serious. "Now you have a friend," she explained. "Everybody needs one." I swallowed because I didn't know how to tell a child that she had just said the exact thing I had needed to hear for years. "This is the best gift anyone has ever given me," I told her, and I meant every word. Her whole face changed. The sadness from earlier started to lift, and a small smile came back. "Really?" "Absolutely." She stood up and hugged me around the neck, her arms barely reaching all the way around. "Thanks for coming to get me, Ethan." I held her carefully and said, "Anytime you need me, I'll show up." And sitting there in that tiny classroom chair, holding that drawing in one hand and that little girl in the other, I realized I wasn't just helping Lily anymore. Somehow, she was saving a part of me too. After I spoke with the principal and Miss Parker, I took Lily for ice cream before meeting Rachel. She sat across from me with a chocolate sundae, almost bigger than her face, eating slowly at first, then smiling again as the afternoon softened around us. Every few minutes, I took the drawing out of my pocket and looked at it like I was afraid it might disappear. Ethan and Lily, best friends. I folded it carefully and put it in my wallet, right behind my driver's license, as if it belonged next to the things that proved who I was. That night, when I got home, I searched through a drawer until I found an old frame I had never used. I cleaned the glass, placed Lily's drawing inside, and set it on the nightstand beside my bed. Before that day, the last thing I usually saw before sleep was the dark ceiling above me. That night, it was two stick figures holding hands under a red heart, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I fell asleep, smiling, because somewhere in the world, a little girl had decided I was her friend. A few weeks later, I was sitting in my office with sunlight stretching across the floor, pretending to study a report I had already read twice. The numbers were right in front of me, but my mind was somewhere else. That had become normal lately. My life used to run on meetings, calls, deals, and deadlines. Now, without warning, it had started running on school pickups, park walks, little drawings, and messages from Lily sent from Rachel's phone. The intercom buzzed, and Nora's voice came through. "Mr. Caldwell, your investment committee meeting starts in 15 minutes. "Thanks, Nora. I'll be there." I reached for my notes, but before I could stand, my cell phone vibrated. It was a message from Lily. "Are you coming today? I have a surprise." I smiled before I could stop myself and typed back, "Of course. I'll meet you at the park at 5. The meeting that followed dragged on for 2 hours, but I barely heard half of it. My partners talked about projections, risk, market movement, all the things that used to hold my full attention, but all I could think about was Lily's surprise. With her, that could mean anything. A shiny rock she found near the playground. A new drawing. A leaf shaped like a heart. A serious question about why grown-ups drink coffee even when it tastes bad. At 4:30, I did something the old Ethan Caldwell would never have done. I closed my folder, stood up, and ended the meeting early. I have an appointment I can't miss, I told them. The room went quiet for a second. These were men who had watched me work past midnight, cancel dinners, skip holidays, and push through every meeting like nothing outside the office mattered. Now they were staring at me because, for once, something outside the office mattered more. I thought Lily's surprise would be another drawing, maybe a rock she had found on the playground, maybe one of those little things children carry around like treasure because adults have forgotten how to see them. But that evening, when I saw her running around the fountain at the park with Rachel watching from a bench nearby, I had no idea she was about to let me into the one place I had never expected to be invited. Their home. Lily spotted me before I even reached the path. "Ethan," she shouted, running straight toward me. "You really came?" I knelt down and caught her in a hug, and by then that little hug had become something my day almost waited for. "Of course I came," I told her. "I wouldn't miss your surprise." Rachel walked over with a soft smile, and lately I had noticed something different in her. She still looked tired, still careful, still like a woman who had learned not to trust life too quickly, but her shoulders didn't seem as tight anymore. Sometimes when she looked at me, she didn't look away right away, and I hated how much that made my heart move. "She's been excited since school," Rachel said. I could barely get her to eat. I looked at Lily. "So what's the big surprise?" Lily glanced around like someone might steal the secret. "I can't tell you here. You have to come to our apartment." I looked at Rachel, surprised, because until then, we had always stayed in safe public places. Parks, diners, the library, school pickups. Rachel gave a small shrug, but there was a smile behind it. "I think it's time," she said, "only if you don't have other plans." I answered before I could make it sound casual. "Nothing I have is more important than this." Their building was a few blocks from the park, modest but clean, the kind of place where every hallway light seemed to buzz a little, and every door looked like it held a different, hard-working story behind it. Lily ran up the stairs ahead of us, while Rachel kept one hand close to her back without even thinking, ready to catch her if she slipped. That small gesture stayed with me. It said more about motherhood than any speech could. When we reached the 3rd floor, Lily stopped in front of a door and announced proudly, "Apartment 12, this is us." Rachel unlocked the door, and I felt nervous in a way that almost embarrassed me. I had walked into boardrooms full of powerful people without blinking, but stepping into that small apartment felt different. It felt like being trusted. The living room was small, but it had warmth the second you entered. A little sofa with colorful pillows, a shelf full of used books, a few plants by the window, and pictures of Lily on the wall. Baby Lily, toddler Lily, first day of school Lily with a smile too big for her face. Rachel looked around and said, a little too quickly, "It's not much, but it's ours." I shook my head. "It's perfect," and I meant it. My apartment had expensive furniture and nothing that felt alive. This place had less of everything, but somehow it had more life in one corner than my whole home had in every room. "Now the surprise," Lily said, grabbing my hand and pulling me toward the kitchen. On the small table were 3 plates, a bowl of pasta with sauce, and a simple green salad. Rachel leaned closer and said, "Lily insisted on making dinner." I helped with the stove. Lily lifted her chin proudly. "I made the pasta. The surprise is you're having dinner with us." For a second, I didn't know what to say. It was just dinner. Pasta, salad, 3 plates on a small table. But to me, it felt like being handed something I hadn't even known I was missing. This wasn't a business dinner. No one wanted anything signed. No one was trying to impress me. A mother and her daughter had made space for me at their table. "That's the best surprise you could have given me," I said, and Rachel looked at me like she could hear that I wasn't just being polite. The meal was simple, but I couldn't remember the last time food had tasted that good. Lily talked through most of it, telling us about school, about how Tyler Brooks got in trouble for pulling a girl's hair, about how Miss Parker praised her drawing of the digestive system, and about how she was pretty sure she could already become a doctor if someone just gave her a white coat. Rachel kept telling her to slow down and chew, but she was smiling while she said it. Then, when Lily finally took a real bite of food, Rachel turned to me and asked, "How was your day?" It caught me off guard. People asked me about numbers, projects, decisions, money. Very few people asked about my day like they actually wanted the answer. "It was okay," I said, then realized how empty that sounded. Long meeting, new project, nothing exciting. Rachel studied me for a moment. "You look tired." I laughed softly. "I probably work too much." "Probably?" she said, raising an eyebrow. Lily looked up with pasta still in her mouth. "Because of us?" Rachel immediately said, "Lily, don't talk with your mouth full." I smiled and answered anyway. "Yes, because of you." Lily's eyes lit up like I had just given her another gift. After dinner, Lily insisted on showing me her room. It was small, with one bed, a little desk, some library books stacked carefully, and drawings taped near the window. On the wall hung the school uniform I had helped buy, ironed neatly on a hanger like something important. "Do you like it?" she asked, suddenly nervous. "I love it," I said. "It's very organized." Lily nodded seriously. "Doctors have to be organized." I didn't laugh, because to her, that wasn't cute. It was a plan. When we went back to the living room, Rachel was standing on the small balcony looking out at the city. Lily yawned so wide she tried to hide it with both hands. "I think somebody needs bed," Rachel said. "It's not late," Lily protested automatically, even though her eyes were already heavy. "It's almost 9, and you have school tomorrow. Go brush your teeth. I'll be there in a minute." Lily dragged her feet toward the hallway, then came back and wrapped her arms around me. "Will you still be here when I wake up?" The question hit me in a place I wasn't ready for. I looked at Rachel because I didn't know how to answer without giving Lily something I couldn't promise. Rachel stepped in gently. "No, baby. Ethan has his own place to sleep, but maybe he can come back for dinner another night." Lily looked at me. "Promise?" I swallowed, because that one word felt heavier than it should have. "I promise," I said. And I knew I would keep it. When Lily finally went to her room, Rachel made coffee, and we sat together on the little balcony with the city lights spread out below us. It wasn't a fancy view, not like the skyline from my apartment, but sitting there with a warm mug in my hands and the sound of Lily brushing her teeth in the next room, it felt more real than any view I had paid for. For a while, neither of us said much. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that didn't ask anything from you. Then Rachel looked toward Lily's room and said softly, "She adores you, you know." I kept my eyes on the lights because I wasn't sure what my face would show if I looked at her. "I adore her too," I said. Rachel nodded, but there was something careful in her expression. Gratitude, fear, maybe both. And sitting beside her on that small balcony, I understood that being welcomed into someone's life is not a small thing. Sometimes it starts with dinner. Sometimes with a child asking if you'll still be there in the morning. And sometimes, without anyone saying it out loud, you realize you've already started wanting the answer to be yes. The feeling goes both ways. I told Rachel quietly, staring down at the coffee in my hands, because looking directly at her suddenly felt dangerous in a way boardrooms and negotiations never had. "Lily's incredible, and honestly, that's because of you." Rachel leaned back slightly in the chair, the city lights reflecting softly in her eyes. For a second, she looked tired again, not physically this time, but like someone remembering years she usually kept buried just to survive them. "It wasn't easy raising her alone," she admitted. "Most days, it still isn't." She smiled faintly. But then she laughs at something stupid or runs into my arms after school, and somehow everything feels worth it again. I nodded slowly. Then, before I could stop myself, I asked the question I had wondered about for weeks. "You never talk about Lily's dad." The second the words left my mouth, I regretted them. "Sorry, you don't have to answer that." But Rachel surprised me. She stayed quiet for a moment, then looked out toward the street below before saying, "There isn't much to tell. He wasn't ready to be a father. Honestly, I don't think he even wanted to try. He left before Lily was born." Something twisted hard inside me when she said it. I looked toward Lily's bedroom door and couldn't understand how anyone could walk away from a child like that. Or from Rachel. "He's an idiot," I said before I could soften it. "He has no idea what he gave up." Rachel laughed quietly under her breath, but there was sadness sitting behind it. "For a long time, I was angry," she admitted. "Then one day I got too tired to stay angry anymore. After that, it was just me and Lily against the world." She paused there, then looked at me in a way that made my pulse jump. "At least, it was before you showed up." My throat tightened. "Rachel, She lifted her hand gently, stopping me before I could force words into a moment that didn't need them. "You don't have to explain anything," she said softly. "I just wanted you to know what you've meant to us." The night breeze moved a few strands of hair across her face, and she tucked them behind her ear before continuing. "You gave Lily something I couldn't, no matter how hard I tried. She feels safe now, confident. She doesn't walk into rooms looking like she needs to apologize for existing anymore." I looked down at my hands because hearing that hit harder than I expected. All this time I thought I was the one helping them, but Rachel was making me realize they had changed me just as much. "You two gave me something too," I admitted quietly. "Before you, my life looked successful from the outside, but honestly, it felt empty. I had money, property, awards, all the things people spend years chasing, and every night I still went home, feeling like there was nobody waiting for me anywhere." Rachel's expression softened completely then. She reached across the little table and rested her hand lightly over mine. "You're not alone anymore," she said. It was such a simple sentence, but I swear nothing anyone had ever told me landed deeper than that did in that moment. We sat there quietly for a while after that, the city glowing beneath the balcony, while the sound of Lily moving around in her room drifted softly through the apartment. It didn't feel awkward. It felt like peace. The kind of peace I used to think only existed in movies or in other people's lives. When I finally stood up to leave, I noticed something strange. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a visitor in the world anymore. I felt rooted somewhere, like part of me had finally stopped wandering. At the door, I hesitated before asking, "Can I come back tomorrow?" Rachel smiled immediately this time. No hesitation, no guarded look. "We're making tacos tomorrow night," she said. "Lily's favorite." "And yours?" I asked before I could stop myself. Rachel tilted her head with the smallest teasing smile. "I like enchiladas better, actually, but tacos are the compromise." I laughed softly. "Then tacos it is." When I stepped into the hallway and the door closed behind me, I stayed there for a second instead of walking away. From inside the apartment, I could hear Rachel singing softly to Lily while getting her ready for bed. It wasn't even a full song, more like a tired mother humming the same melody she'd probably hummed 100 nights before. But hearing it there, through that little apartment door, did something to me I couldn't explain. I had spent years believing success meant expensive offices, private clubs, penthouses with city views, people knowing my name. But standing in that hallway, listening to a mother sing her daughter to sleep, I realized none of those things had ever once made me feel what I felt right then. Home. Somehow, in that tiny apartment on the 3rd floor, with a little girl who dreamed of becoming a doctor and a woman who carried the weight of the world without complaining about it, I had found the one thing money had never been able to buy me: belonging. The rain had started by the time I reached my car. A light drizzle blurred the city lights across the windshield while soft music played low through the speakers, but I barely noticed any of it. My head was still back on that balcony with Rachel and Lily. The smell of coffee. Lily laughing with sauce on her cheek. Rachel's hand touching mine for just a second longer than necessary. Tiny moments, ordinary moments, but somehow they felt bigger than every achievement I had spent half my life working toward. At a red light, I opened the glove compartment looking for a napkin, and my fingers brushed against folded paper. Lily's drawing. I had almost forgotten I kept it there. I unfolded it carefully, smoothing out the bent corners with my thumb. There we were again, 2 stick figures holding hands under a giant red heart. Ethan and Lily, best friends. The letters were uneven and crooked, but to me they looked more honest than any contract I had ever signed. The light changed green behind me. Horns started honking. But for a second, I just sat there staring at that drawing like it was the most valuable thing in the car. Then I placed it gently on the passenger seat and drove the rest of the way home. My apartment felt colder the second I walked inside. The automatic lights came on, revealing the same spotless furniture, expensive artwork, and designer decorations I used to think represented success. Before meeting Rachel and Lily, I had been proud of this place. Now it just looked quiet, too quiet. I loosened my tie, dropped my coat over a chair, and stood in the middle of the living room listening to absolutely nothing. No laughter. No dishes clinking in the kitchen. No little voice asking questions every 30 seconds. Just silence. And for the first time, silence no longer felt peaceful to me. It felt lonely. That night, when I walked back into my apartment with Lily's drawing in my hand, the place felt different in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. The rain was running down the windows, the city lights were blurred outside, and everything around me was exactly as expensive and perfect as it had always been. But for the first time, all that perfection felt cold. I stood by the glass, looking down at the streets below, and asked myself out loud, what am I doing? I was 42 years old. I had built the kind of life people praised from a distance. A successful company, money and more accounts than I needed. Homes and cities I barely visited. People knew my name, shook my hand, read about me in business magazines, and assumed a man like me must know exactly what he wanted. But standing there alone, holding a child's drawing like it was something fragile and holy, I realized I wasn't sure I had ever known what I wanted at all. I poured a glass of whiskey, not because I wanted to drink, but because I needed something familiar in my hands while my whole life started to feel unfamiliar. I sat on a leather sofa that cost more than some people made in a year, with that wrinkled piece of paper resting on my knee. The contrast almost made me laugh. Everything in that room had been chosen by designers, paid for without worry, placed exactly where it was supposed to be, and yet the only thing that felt alive was a crooked drawing made by a little girl with colored pencils. Ethan and Lily, best friends. I read the words again, slowly. Best friends. I couldn't remember the last time anyone had called me that. Somewhere along the way, friends had turned into contacts. Lunches had turned into meetings. Conversations had turned into opportunities. Even kindness had started to feel like something people used when they wanted access to something else. But Lily didn't want access to anything. She had hugged me because she meant it. She had drawn that picture because, in her mind, I belonged in it. No strategy. No hidden reason. Just a child deciding that I mattered to her. And Rachel, the way she had looked at me on that balcony, the way her hand had rested over mine for just a moment, the way she said, I wasn't alone anymore. I didn't know what to call what was happening between us, and maybe I was afraid to name it too soon. But I knew this much. Their small apartment had made me feel more at home in one evening than my own place had in years. I walked into the bedroom and opened the drawer beside my bed. At first, I placed the drawing inside, carefully, like I was putting away something valuable. Then I stopped. I didn't want it hidden, so I took it out again, set it on the nightstand, and just looked at it for a while. 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, holding hands under a red heart. It was simple, almost silly, but it made my chest ache in a way nothing expensive ever had. Was it possible to reach 42 and only then realize what had been missing? Was it possible that a little girl with broken shoes and a tired mother working long shifts had found a door inside me I didn't even know was locked? I picked up my phone and opened the photo gallery. Between photos from boardrooms, charity events, and company dinners, I found the picture we had taken at the park a few weeks earlier. Lily was in the middle, holding an ice cream cone that was melting down her hand, smiling so wide it looked impossible. Rachel stood beside her, hair shining in the sun, her smile still shy but real. And then there was me, standing on the other side, looking nothing like the man in the magazines. I looked relaxed, present, almost happy. We looked like a family. That thought hit me so hard I had to sit down on the edge of the bed. Because that was the truth I had been circling around for weeks. I didn't miss my old life when I was away from them. I missed them when I went back to it. I missed Lily's questions, Rachel's quiet strength, the little kitchen table, the sound of laughter in a room that didn't need to be perfect to feel full. I lay down on the bed I had slept in alone for too many years, and for the first time, the apartment didn't feel like a home at all. It felt like a showroom, a beautiful place no one had ever really lived in. I had built my loneliness carefully, brick by brick, with ambition, work, control, and the belief that needing people made a man weak. But Lily and Rachel had a pair of school shoes, a dinner at a small table, a child's drawing, in a mother's tired smile. Those were the things that had done what success never could. They made me want to become someone better. That night I didn't fall asleep thinking about contracts or numbers. I fell asleep thinking about tacos the next evening, about Lily's dream of becoming a doctor, about Rachel humming softly behind a closed door, about a life I had never planned but suddenly couldn't imagine walking away from. I was changing, slowly, quietly, in ways I didn't fully understand yet. And the strange thing was, I wasn't scared of it. I liked the man I was becoming around them. After that, days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. At first, Mondays and Thursdays were our routine. I picked Lily up from school, took her for a snack, then met Rachel after work. Saturdays belonged to the three of us: groceries, park walks, library visits, sometimes a children's movie on their small couch, while Lily explained every scene like she was the director. Then, without anyone announcing it, Tuesdays and Fridays became visits too. Before long, I was only spending Wednesdays and Sundays at my own apartment, and even then, Rachel and I kept texting, and Lily would call before bed to tell me something very important, like what color marker had run out, or what kind of doctor she had decided to be that week. On one Tuesday, that autumn, I left the office early again. There was an important meeting scheduled for late afternoon, the kind I used to never miss, but I handed it to my vice president without thinking twice. Because somewhere across town, there was a little girl waiting to show me something, and a woman who had started to feel more like home than any place I had ever owned. A year earlier, leaving an important meeting early just to buy bread and chocolate cake for dinner at a tiny apartment would have sounded ridiculous to me. Now it felt normal. More than normal. It felt like the best part of my day. On the way to Rachel and Lily's place, I stopped by the little bakery downstairs from their block. The warm smell of fresh bread hit me the second I walked in. "Mrs. Bellini," looked up and smiled before I even spoke. "The usual, Mr. Caldwell?" "Yeah," I said. "And the chocolate cake Lily likes." Mrs. Bellini laughed softly while packing everything up. "That little girl has you wrapped around her finger." Then she looked at me a little closer. "You look happier these days." I smiled without thinking. "I think I am." By the time I got to their building, it already felt familiar. I had my own key now, but I still rang the bell first out of habit. "It's open," Rachel called from inside. The second I stepped in, that warm feeling hit me again. The apartment still looked the same, but little pieces of me had quietly started appearing everywhere. My slippers near the couch. A mug with my name on it beside Rachel's favorite cup. One of my jackets hanging near the door. Small things. Normal things. Somehow they meant more to me than everything waiting back at my penthouse. "I brought bread and cake," I called out, setting the bags on the counter. Rachel was in the kitchen chopping vegetables, sleeves rolled up, blonde hair tied loosely behind her head. She looked tired from work, but when she turned and smiled at me, my whole chest loosened the way it always did around her. "You always bring something," she said. "I like to," I answered. Then I leaned down and kissed her softly. A few months ago that would have terrified me. Now it felt as natural as breathing. "Where's Lily?" "Homework," Rachel said. "Apparently she has another surprise for you." I hung my jacket up and rolled my sleeves. I didn't wear ties here anymore. Around them, I didn't feel like I needed armor. "Need help?" I asked. Rachel smirked. "Can you chop vegetables without almost losing a finger this time?" "No promises." She laughed under her breath, and just hearing that sound after a long day made everything else feel far away. We worked side by side in the small kitchen, while she told me about her day, and I told her about mine. "We're closing a deal with a Japanese company," I said. "Too many meetings. Too many people talking in circles." Rachel glanced at me knowingly. "And yet you still left work early." I smiled. "A few months ago, I would have stayed until midnight." "Now?" she asked quietly. I looked at her for a second. "Now I've got somewhere I'd rather be." Before she could answer, Lily came flying into the kitchen. "Ethan," she crashed into me so hard I almost lost balance. I picked her up anyway and spun her once while she laughed. Did you bring cake? Rachel sighed dramatically. Lily? Right, sorry. Lily straightened herself up and looked at me seriously. Hi, Ethan. How was your day? I laughed. Much better now. How was yours? Her eyes lit up instantly. I got an A in math, and Miss Parker said my solar system drawing was the best in class. Then she lowered her voice like she was about to reveal government secrets. And Tyler Brooks apologized to me. That caught me off guard. Seriously? Rachel nodded while stirring sauce on the stove. His dad found out what happened at school. Apparently he wasn't happy. Lily crossed her arms proudly. Tyler gave me a chocolate bar and said sorry for being mean. I told him he should be nice to everybody, not just me. I stared at her for a second, feeling this ridiculous amount of pride in my chest. That was a really good thing to say, kiddo. She shrugged like it wasn't a big deal, but I could tell she loved hearing it. Dinner was simple. Ratatouille and rice, nothing fancy. But sitting there at that tiny table, listening to Rachel and Lily talk over each other, felt better than every expensive dinner I'd ever had in my life. Lily talked nonstop about school and how she was saving money for a real anatomy book because future doctors need serious books. Rachel kept reminding her to stop waving her fork around while talking. I just sat there watching them both, realizing somewhere along the way this had stopped feeling like visiting. It felt like coming home. After dinner, Lily carried the chocolate cake into the living room like it was the most important dessert on earth. She cut slices way too big and handed me mine carefully with both hands. Then she sat beside me on the couch, so close, her shoulder pressed against my arm. Good? She asked the second I took a bite. Very good, I said honestly. Want another piece? She asked immediately, already halfway off the couch. Rachel laughed. Let the man survive the first slice first. Lily dropped back down beside me, giggling to herself. I looked across the room at Rachel, watching us with that quiet little smile she got when she thought nobody noticed. And sitting there with cake on my plate, Lily leaning against me, and Rachel across from us looking tired but happy, I realized something that honestly scared me a little. I didn't just care about them anymore. Somewhere along the way, they had become my family too. I do, I said, looking at Lily beside me on the couch. And honestly, I'd like to stay a little longer. Lily smiled like that was the easiest thing in the world to understand. You can stay forever if you want. Rachel nearly choked on her coffee, and I felt my face get warm before I could stop it. Kids have a way of saying the thing adults are too scared to say out loud. Rachel cleared her throat quickly. Lily, go brush your teeth. It's getting late. Lily groaned like the world was ending. It's not that late. It's almost 9, and you have school tomorrow. She dragged herself off the couch, then turned back and wrapped her arms around my neck. Good night, Ethan. Will you still be here when I wake up? That question always did something to me. It was so simple, but it carried everything a child is afraid to ask directly. Are you staying? Are you leaving? Can I count on you? I touched her hair gently and said, Not this time, kiddo. But I'll be here for dinner tomorrow. She looked at me closely. Promise? I promise. Only then did she finally go to her room. When the apartment got quiet, Rachel and I stayed in the living room, sitting close enough that our hands almost touched. It wasn't an awkward quiet. It was the kind of quiet that makes you realize you don't have to perform for someone anymore. Rachel leaned back against the couch and said, She adores you. I smiled and reached for her hand. I adore her too. Then I looked around the room, at the handmade curtains, the plants near the window, the worn little bookshelf, all the things that had somehow become more familiar to me than the expensive furniture in my own place. You two changed my life, I said before I could dress the sentence up. Rachel squeezed my fingers. You changed ours too. My eyes drifted to a photo on the bookshelf, partly hidden behind a vase. I had never noticed it before. Who's that? I asked. Rachel followed my gaze and stood up. Oh, that's old. She picked up the dusty frame and brought it back to the couch. The photo showed 2 young women standing together on what looked like a college campus, arms around each other, hair blowing in the wind, smiling like life hadn't hurt them yet. Rachel pointed to the blonde woman. That's my mom, Helen Walker. And this was her best friend in college. Mom said they were inseparable back then. I looked at the other woman, and for a second the room seemed to tilt. Dark hair, bright eyes, That wide smile I had seen in old family albums my whole life. I reached for the frame, but my hand wasn't steady. Rachel. My voice came out thinner than I expected. That's my mother. Rachel stared at me. What? Margaret Caldwell, I said, still looking at the picture. That's my mom. For a moment, neither of us said anything. We just sat there with the past sitting between us in a cheap wooden frame. Rachel took the photo back slowly, looking at it like it had become something completely new. My mom never told me much. She passed when I was 16. Her voice softened. A long illness. I covered her hand with mine. I'm sorry. She nodded, then looked at me. What about your mom? She passed 5 years ago, I said. It was sudden. We stayed quiet after that, both of us trying to understand how two women who had once loved each other like sisters had somehow led us here, years later, to this small living room. Then Lily's voice came from the hallway. Are you guys crying? She stood there in teddy bear pajamas, hair messy from changing clothes, looking at us like we had been caught doing something strange. I quickly wiped my eyes. No, kiddo, we just found out something surprising. Lily came closer, climbed onto the edge of the couch, and looked at the photo in Rachel's hands. Who are they? Rachel pointed softly. This is my mom, your grandma Helen. And this? She glanced at me. This is Ethan's mom, Margaret. Lily's eyes got wide. Your mom and Ethan's mom were friends? Looks like they were best friends, I said. Lily stared at the picture for a second, then smiled like the whole thing made perfect sense. That's why we're friends now. Rachel and I looked at each other. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because somehow a child had found the cleanest way to say what we were both feeling. Maybe so, I said. Lily crossed her arms with complete confidence. It's not maybe, it's meant to be. After Lily finally went to bed for real, Rachel and I stayed up going through an old box of her mother's things. Inside were a few yellowed letters, folded carefully, written in handwriting that belonged to another lifetime. Margaret and Helen had been roommates, best friends, the kind of young women who promised never to lose each other, then somehow did when life pulled them into different cities, different marriages, different troubles. Rachel read one letter out loud, then stopped because her voice shook. It feels like they started a story and never got to finish it, she said. I looked at the photo again. Maybe we're the unfinished part. She didn't answer right away, but her hand found mine. When it got late, I knew I should leave. But for the first time, leaving felt wrong. Not inconvenient, not sad, wrong. Rachel seemed to know before I said anything. Stay tonight, she said quietly. Just tonight. Lily will be happy to see you at breakfast. I slept on the couch that night. It was too short for me, and my back complained almost immediately, but I didn't care. I lay there listening to the sounds of the apartment, the clock ticking, the fridge humming, Rachel moving softly in the next room, Lily turning in her sleep down the hall. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't quiet in the perfect way my penthouse was quiet. It was alive, and somewhere between those small sounds and that old photo on the coffee table, I finally understood that home was not a place you bought. It was a place where people let you stay, where a child hopes you'll still be there in the morning, where the past somehow opens a door for the future. That night, I fell asleep, feeling like I belonged somewhere. Not in my office, not in my penthouse, not in the rooms where people praised my name. I belonged in that small apartment, with a little girl who dreamed of becoming a doctor, and a woman who had survived more than she ever said out loud. I didn't know yet how much that feeling would be tested. I didn't know winter was about to bring the kind of fear that makes you realize what people truly mean to you. I only knew that, for the first time in my adult life, I didn't want to wake up anywhere else. That Thursday, I knew something was wrong before anyone said it out loud. I was supposed to pick Lily up from school like I did every week, but when I pulled up to Maple Grove Elementary, she wasn't standing by the gate with her backpack bouncing on her shoulders. That little spot by the fence was empty, and for some reason it scared me more than it should have. I found Miss Parker near the office, and the look on her face made my stomach drop. Mr. Caldwell, Lily left early today, she said. The school got a call from Mrs. Harper. Her mother wasn't feeling well. I barely let her finish before thanking her and heading back to my car. The drive to Rachel's apartment felt too long, even though I must have broken every rule I normally followed on the road. By the time I reached their building, I didn't wait for the elevator. I ran up the stairs to the third floor and knocked, but no one answered. My hand was already shaking when I used my key. Rachel? Lily? Then Lily's small voice came from the bedroom. We're in here. I found Rachel lying in bed, pale, flushed, and trying too hard to breathe like everything was fine. Lily sat beside her, holding a glass of water with both hands, so carefully it made my chest hurt. Rachel tried to sit up when she saw me, but a rough cough stopped her. I moved to the bed and touched her forehead. She was burning up. What happened? I asked, but Lily answered before Rachel could pretend it was nothing. Mom couldn't finish work. She coughed really bad, and there was blood. Her manager sent her home in a cab. Everything inside me went cold. I looked at Rachel. We're going to the hospital, now. She shook her head weakly. I just need to rest. Lily's eyes filled, but she fought not to cry. Mom, please, you promised you'd see a doctor if it got worse. That was when I understood this hadn't started today. The signs had been there for weeks. The cough she brushed off, the way she stopped on the stairs, the tiredness she kept hiding behind a smile. I looked at Rachel and kept my voice firm. This isn't up for debate. I'll carry you if I have to. Maybe it was my tone, maybe it was Lily's face. Rachel finally nodded. Okay, but just a quick check. It was not quick. After the first exam, the hospital sent Rachel straight for tests. I stayed with Lily in the waiting room, trying to keep her calm with word games and little stories, while my own mind kept going to places I didn't want it to go. 3 hours later, Dr. Bennett came out and asked to speak with me privately. I started to say I was only a family friend, but he stopped me gently. Rachel asked me to talk to you. She said you're the closest person she has. I looked back at Lily, asleep on the bench with my coat around her shoulders, and that sentence nearly broke me. I stepped just far enough away that I could still see her. How bad is it? I asked. Doctor. Bennett didn't dress it up. Rachel had a serious chronic lung condition. Her lungs had been damaged over time, most likely from years of breathing in harsh cleaning chemicals at the laundromat. He said medication could help control it and slow it down, but the most important thing was clear. She could not keep working there. Not anymore. When I saw Rachel again, she was sitting on the edge of the hospital bed, dressed and ready to leave, looking smaller under those bright hospital lights, but still trying to look strong. I'm sorry, she said before I could speak. That hurt me more than anything. Don't apologize, I said, sitting beside her. Why didn't you tell me it was this bad? She gave the same little shrug she always used when life had cornered her. I thought it would pass. I didn't want to worry anyone. I took her hand. The doctor told me. Rachel, why did you keep working there if it was making you sick? Her eyes dropped. Because bills don't stop coming, Ethan. Lily needs food, clothes, school things. She needs her mom healthy, I said softly. Rachel's eyes filled then, and she looked away fast, trying to hold herself together. I don't have a choice. Yes, you do, I said. Come work with me. She looked at me like she hadn't heard right. What? My company needs someone in records and archives. It's light office work, clean air, steady hours, better pay. I paused because I knew her pride mattered. This isn't charity. It's a real job. You're organized, careful, and you learn fast. That's exactly what I need. Rachel shook her head slowly. I don't have office experience. Then you'll learn, I said, and I'll make sure you're trained properly. She stared at me for a long moment, still scared, still tired, but somewhere beneath all that, I saw the smallest piece of relief. And in that hospital room, with Lily asleep outside wrapped in my coat and Rachel's hand trembling in mine, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't just helping them through a hard day anymore. I was choosing them. Fully. And whatever came next, I wasn't going to let Rachel face it alone. Rachel looked at me for a long moment like she wanted to believe me, but was still scared to. Why? She asked quietly. Why are you doing all this for us? I looked at her sitting there exhausted, still trying to hold on to her pride even after everything that happened that day, and I answered honestly, because I care about both of you. Then I smiled a little to make it easier on her. And because it's my company, I'm allowed to hire good people when I find them. Rachel laughed softly before another cough interrupted her. I don't want pity, Ethan. Good, I said, taking her hands. Because that's not what this is. You're smart, organized, hardworking, and stronger than you think. I need someone like you." She studied my face carefully, searching for any sign of guilt or charity. When she didn't find it, she finally nodded. "Temporary," she whispered. I smiled. Temporary. On the drive home, Lily fell asleep in the back seat, wrapped in my coat, exhausted from trying to be brave all day. Rachel sat beside me, staring out the window at the city lights passing by. After a while, she spoke so quietly, I almost missed it. She was really scared today. Her voice cracked at the end. I looked at Lily in the mirror, finally sleeping peacefully. "She's stronger than we think," I said softly. "But she shouldn't have to be strong all the time." Rachel turned toward me then, and for once she didn't hide the fear in her eyes. "Am I going to be okay?" I reached over and held her hand. "You are," I told her. "I promise." The next few weeks changed everything. Rachel rested because the doctor ordered her to, and I practically moved into their apartment without even realizing it. I drove Lily to school, brought groceries, burned dinner twice trying to cook, and learned exactly where Rachel kept the tea bags and the unpaid bills she tried to hide from me. When I told Nora that Rachel would be joining the company after she recovered, Nora just smiled like she already knew this was coming. A month later, Rachel walked into my office building for the first time as an employee. She wore gray slacks, a light blue blouse, and looked nervous enough to stop breathing in the elevator. I leaned closer and said quietly, "Trust me, you're going to be amazing." And she was. Within days, she reorganized problems in the records department my staff had ignored for years. One afternoon, my vice president walked into my office and joked, "Your girlfriend is impressive." For the first time, I didn't correct him. The best part was watching Lily change. She laughed more, slept better. She stopped carrying that quiet fear kids should never have to carry. One afternoon, while we were drinking hot chocolate in the company cafeteria, Lily looked at me proudly and said, "Mom was always good at things. Nobody just gave her a real chance before." I sat there quiet for a second because somehow an 8-year-old had explained life better than most adults ever could. Sundays slowly became hours. No more lonely weekends in my cold penthouse pretending work was enough to fill a life. Now Sundays meant dishes in the sink, Lily's drawings covering the table, Rachel laughing from the kitchen, and a kind of peace I used to think only existed in movies. One Sunday afternoon, after Lily ran downstairs to play with a friend, Rachel stood beside me, washing dishes, and asked softly, "You know what Lily told me last night?" "What?" Rachel smiled without looking at me. She said, "It feels like you've always lived here." I looked around the small kitchen and answered honestly, "Maybe because this is the only place I actually feel like myself." Rachel went quiet for a few seconds before looking directly at me. "And who is that?" I thought about the man I used to be, the man who lived for contracts, meetings, and empty rooms. Then I looked back at her. Someone who finally understands what matters. Rachel stepped closer, and the kiss we shared felt different from the others. Softer. Deeper. Like we had both stopped pretending this was temporary. That night, while I was getting ready to leave, Lily asked the question she always asked. "Will you still be here when I wake up?" I opened my mouth to give my usual answer, but Rachel spoke first. "Why don't you stay, Ethan?" I looked at her. She seemed nervous, but she didn't look away this time. Then she added quietly, "Not just tonight. I mean, every day." The whole room went still. Lily looked at me with hope written all over her face, and Rachel looked at me like she was afraid I might say no. I stood there holding my coat, realizing the thing I'd spent years searching for had finally been placed right in front of me in the simplest possible way. "A home. Are you sure?" I asked, because for once in my life, the thing I wanted most was also the thing I was most afraid to accept. Rachel looked at me, steady and calm, and said, "I'm sure." Lily nodded so hard it almost made me laugh. "We're sure." 2 weeks later, my penthouse was on the market. What surprised me most was how little I actually needed from it. A few boxes of clothes, some books, a handful of things I thought mattered, until I carried them into Rachel's small third-floor apartment and realized they didn't. That place was fuller now, not because I brought much with me, but because I finally stopped living like a guest in my own life. Rachel was getting better. The treatment helped, and being away from the laundromat changed her faster than any of us expected. Color came back to her face. Her cough became less frequent. At work, she didn't just manage, She shined. Before long, she was promoted to administrative assistant, and I swear nobody in that office looked prouder than Lily when she heard it. As for Lily, her dream of becoming a doctor only grew stronger after what happened to Rachel. One night at dinner, she looked up from her plate and announced, "I'm going to study lungs so people don't get sick like Mom did." Rachel and I looked at each other, and neither of us had to say anything. That little girl had taken fear and turned it into purpose. Life was not suddenly perfect. Rachel still had tired days, bills still came, worry still knocked on the door from time to time. But the difference was, nobody had to answer it alone anymore. We were a family now, not by paperwork, not by blood, but by showing up, over and over again, until love had nowhere else to go but home. One Sunday afternoon, I watched Rachel and Lily set the table for lunch, and I caught myself standing still in the kitchen with a smile I didn't even know was on my face. Rachel noticed. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. I looked at the two of them, at Lily placing forks slightly crooked beside each plate, at Rachel pretending not to correct her, and I said, "I'm thinking about how you two saved me." Rachel shook her head softly. "Ethan, you saved us." I moved closer and wrapped my arms around her. "No," I said. "I helped with things. You gave me a life." And standing there in that small apartment, with lunch almost ready and Lily humming some song from school, I finally understood something my mother used to say but I never really heard. A successful life is not the one everyone can admire from far away. It is the one where somebody looks up when you walk through the door. Spring came back to the city, and with it came longer days, warmer air, and a strange feeling that a full year had passed since a little girl in broken shoes stopped me outside my office. 1 year. That was all it took to turn my life completely around. The apartment no longer felt small to me, maybe because we had painted the walls together one weekend, laughing when Lily got more paint on her shirt than on the wall. Maybe because I had built new kitchen shelves, with Lily standing beside me giving medical supervision, even though it had nothing to do with medicine. Maybe because the old sofa was gone now, replaced by one big enough for the three of us to squeeze together on movie nights. Every change was small. Every change meant something. That Saturday afternoon, I was home alone making dinner while Rachel was at Lily's school for a meeting about a science project. I smiled the whole time I cooked, thinking about how Lily had spent the week talking nonstop about cells, microscopes, and why the human body was the coolest machine ever. Then the door flew open. "Ethan!" Lily's voice filled the apartment before I even saw her. She ran into the kitchen with her face shining. Guess what? I wiped my hands on the apron and pretended to think very hard. "You won a Nobel Prize?" "Almost," she said, laughing. "My project got picked for the state science fair." I bent down just in time to catch her hug. "That's amazing, kiddo. I knew you could do it." Rachel came in behind her, tired but glowing with pride. "Miss Parker said it's the first time in years someone her age has been selected." Lily blushed. "I'm not a genius. I just really like science." "And you worked hard," I said, touching her hair. "That matters more." Lily grinned. "Can we celebrate with ice cream?" "After dinner," Rachel and I said at the same time. And Lily rolled her eyes like we had become far too predictable. Then she suddenly remembered something and ran to her backpack. "Wait, first I have to show you my notebook." She pulled out the blue shiny notebook we had bought together, the one she said was only for important doctor stuff. She placed it on the table like it was a medical textbook and waved us over. Rachel and I sat beside her, trying not to smile too much. Lily opened it carefully. Page after page was filled with colorful drawings, tiny notes, arrows, and labels written in her neat little handwriting. She pointed to one drawing with serious focus. "This is the heart," she said. "It pumps blood everywhere, even when you're sleeping." I looked at Rachel, then back at Lily, and felt that same ache in my chest. I had felt the first day I met her, only this time it didn't hurt. It felt full. A year ago, she had asked me for shoes because walking into school made her ashamed. Now she was sitting at our table, explaining the human heart like she already knew how to protect one. And maybe, in her own way, she did. And maybe that's the thing I understand now, after everything that happened. People spend years chasing bigger houses, more money, more status, thinking that's what makes a life meaningful. I did too. But none of that touched the emptiness I used to feel when I came home at night. The truth is, most people don't need someone to rescue them completely. Sometimes they just need one person to notice them before life hardens them too much. One kind moment, one honest hand, one person willing to stay. If I could say anything to the people listening to this story, it would be this. Don't wait until life scares you to finally make room for the people who matter. Don't get so busy building a career or surviving your problems that you forget to build a life you actually want to come home to. Because love rarely arrives in the way we imagine. Sometimes it shows up wearing worn-out shoes, carrying a broken backpack, asking for help in the middle of an ordinary afternoon. A year ago, I thought I was helping a little girl buy school shoes. I didn't realize she was quietly giving me back something I had lost a long time ago. A reason to care. A reason to come home. A reason to stop living like my heart was just another business deal. And honestly, I think that's the real reason this story matters to me. Not because everything became perfect. It didn't. We still have hard days. We still worry. We still get tired. But now nobody carries those things alone anymore. That changes everything. This story was inspired by emotional situations that happen in real life every day. Some names, scenes, and details were changed and recreated with AI-assisted storytelling to protect privacy and creatively retell the experience. If this story touched you, tell me in the comments what moment stayed with you the most. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because there are more stories coming that remind us kindness still matters. And maybe someone out there is only one small act of love away from having their whole life changed too.